we are going to start, for the next couple of weeks, looking at the priests. Who were the priests? And in particular, the priests and the Levites, and how they differ between them and the Israelites. And the story that we're going to use as the starting point before we really delve into the book of Leviticus is the story of the golden calf. Now, what's interesting about the story of the golden calf is that it's actually not a priestly story. Yet somehow it involves the priests. And the Levites, who were going to, there's an article I was trying to bring here, but it did, I don't know if it worked or not. But it was all about the question of who were the Levites. And we've seen in our studies different textual traditions whereby in one case it's God speaking to Moses, which is typically a J source or an E source. And then on occasion, God speaking to Moses and Aaron, which is a priestly source. What we're going to see with the golden calf is that we actually have bookends of priestly material, and in the middle a combination of E and J. And in looking at the story, we're going to realize that the priests have a bone to pick with the entire thing, because the person who is intimately involved in the golden calf story is Aaron. And who is Aaron? He becomes the high priest. Yet, who are the people who are all saved? The Levites, including Aaron. And not only is Aaron saved, he is rewarded in a way in becoming the high priest. And then we're going to look at, when we get into Leviticus, we're going to look at what happens to his sons, which is actually the story that happens in this week's Torah portion in Shmini, about Nadab and Abihu, who go and offer this alien fire to God, and they are immediately zapped on the spot. And we're going to try to understand what's going on here, what is happening to the priests, and who were they, who do they become, and how do they influence the tradition. Just as a recap, when we think about the priestly sources, the priestly traditions, what comes to mind? Who are they?
Aaron and his
Go. So Aaron's descendants, in particular through the line of Aaron.
Right.
Good. What else?
You have in the northern kingdom, you also have a separate group of priests.
Okay, good. So we notice that there are priests that are both central to Jerusalem who work in the temple, and then there's also priests that function outside of Jerusalem in the places where they set up altars and locations for sacrifice.
Aaron.
Correct. Well, they're all descendants from Levi.
Yeah.
Right? They're all descendants from the tribe of Levi. And Levi has a series of children. They have a series of children. And Aaron's line gets the priestly line. The other ones get the Levitical line. Okay, what else do we know about the priests and the Levites?
They're good at slaughtering animals.
They are great at slaughtering animals, right? They are the prime suspect when PETA wants to look into an investigation, okay? Yeah?
So the priests existed long before Jerusalem when it was Shechem.
Yes, they even exist before Shechem.
Yeah.
Right? Not only that, we don't have just priests in the Israelite tradition, we have priests in just about every tradition. Who is the other major priest that we have in the book of Exodus? Really important character.
Oh.
Jethro. Moses' father-in-law is a priest. By the way, there's an even earlier one. It's in the story of Joseph. Joseph marries a priestess. So we have priests that go way, way back. Right? We have a priest right here. Or the daughter of a priest, a priestess. We have a priest over there, right? We have a Levite or daughter of a Levite over here. And what does it mean to connect us today to these people? Why were they given a certain status? And then we're going to trace them through up until the rabbinic period, because the priests become the source of a series of different struggles in history. The Hanukkah story, and in particular what we'll call the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes and all of those people, which will give rise eventually to rabbinic tradition. The priests are really important people. You look like you wanted to say something. No?
No, I'm just happy to talk about this.
You're happy to talk about
Priests
priests.
were not
It's a great topic.
necessarily the way rabbis are teaching.
Correct. They were not necessarily
They were
teachers.
ritual.
They were ritual officiants. They had a job to do. And we're going to try to understand what their job is and what their job becomes. And we're going to look at it starting with the golden calf, because this is kind of the first moment collectively where the people are looking for a leader to guide them. And they do something very characteristic of priests, which goes back to Jerry's point. They want to make a sacrifice. In this case, it's a golden sacrifice. But they want to make a sacrifice. They're looking for a way to connect to God, to their divinity of sorts, to their deity. Okay, so we're going to start exploring this a little bit. I want you to turn to chapter 31 for just a moment.
Which book you need?
It's the same in both. We'll look at both. Chapter 31 in Friedman is on page 172, and chapter 31 in Eitz Chaim is on page 527. By the way, in temple times, what was the role of the Levites?
They were the janitors.
They were the janitors, and
In the temple time, they call people in with the
they did. They were the janitors, the custodians, they cleaned up the mess that the priests made. I always wonder, any of you watch cooking shows? I always wonder who are the people who do the dishes in the cooking shows, because it never seems like the chefs do it.
But even the priests were required to do some of the menial jobs, like cleaning
Sure.
up the
Sure,
after the
and the
sacrifices.
Mishnah goes into extensive detail about what the priests did and how they were trained and the way that they got ready and the way that they washed themselves and clothed themselves and all of that.
Take it out of the camp.
Wait a second, who were the custodians?
The Levites, they were also the musicians.
How did they be the priests and the custodians?
No, the priests and the Levites are two different groups of people.
Oh, the priests came from the Levites.
Well, all right, so let's go back
Some
to,
Levites are priests, but not all priests.
that's great, that's like a math analogy,
Yeah.
right? It's
It's
All
not
priests are
associative,
Levites, but not all Levites.
it's cumulative, no, it's associative.
Transitive.
Not that at all.
It's
No,
the
okay.
smaller subset, it's a subset.
Here, go back for 1 second. Look on page 129. We'll just map this out one more time of the Friedman book. It's chapter 6, verse 14. Okay? Give me the lineage for a moment of the tribe of Levi. Okay, so just to recap. Beautiful. I love it.
Chapter 6 of what book?
Of Exodus.
Gershon.
Okay.
Gershon code.
Okay, so we have Jacob. Jacob has 2 wives. He's got Leah
Right.
and he's got Rachel. Okay, the first 4 children. We've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Okay, from the tribe of Levi, someone give me the breakdown.
Gershon, Kohath, Merari.
So we have Gershon, Kahat, and Merari.
Merari.
Okay? He's got 3 sons. Now what?
Sons of Gershon.
So we know the sons of Gershon, Libni and Shimi, and the sons of Kohat were the ones I want to focus on.
Okay.
Who are they?
Amram,
Amram,
Zizar,
Uziel.
let's see. Amram, Isar, Hebron, and Uziel. Okay? Now the one that I want to focus on in particular is Amram. Amram has 3 kids. Who are they? Aaron, Miriam, and Moses.
They were 400 years later.
They are,
Aaron and Moses.
roughly. 4, yeah. Yocheved is his wife.
Doesn't say Miriam in here.
No, it doesn't because it's a different category. Okay? And who are the sons of
Women,
Yitzhar?
It's women.
Of who?
That's a
Of
Yitzhar. We have Korach,
Korah, Nepheg,
Nepheg,
and Zikri.
and Zikri. We can look at the other ones as well. All right, but as far the only other one I'll look at, Aaron. I guess it's not so important right now about Aaron's for now. Okay, so this is the line of Levi. Levi's got 3 kids. Each of those kids have more kids. Okay? Amram is the one that we typically focus on because Amram marries Yocheved and they have Aaron and Miriam first, and then they have Moses. Alright? And their first cousins are Korach, Nepheg, and Zikri. Why is Korach important?
Rebellion.
Right? He's going to be the one who's going to protest against Moses, saying, I too am worthy of an important role or title. But what we're going to learn is that Aaron, all of Aaron's descendants, specifically his sons, will be priests. And everybody else are Levites.
Okay.
By the way, that makes sense. They're all descendants of Levi. Now, what do we know about the Levites in the land of Israel?
No land.
They had no land.
No portion.
They had no specific portion. Everyone else had a portion. They all have something that they inherit. And even 2.5 of the tribes stay on the other side of the Jordan and take land there. But the Levites have no specific claim to the land, and so they're going to be assigned to work in the temple. But within this Levitical structure, we have two different groups in the hierarchy: the priests that are descendants of Aaron, and the Levites, everyone else. Phil, you look troubled.
No, this is a critical point. I mean, the end of the priests were because they got more than their portion.
Yes. And by the way, what we're actually going to see a lot of over the course of Jewish history is a fight between the priests, who I will also call, in some ways, the zealots. They were the pious ones who were actively trying to get the... What?
Well, in the end, it was the zealots
Hold on,
that destroyed
Stan.
them.
Give me your face.
Yeah, it's just that there were lots of zealots in the time of the Second Temple who weren't.
Yeah.
It's true. The challenge, though, is that when we look at some of the things in the Torah, like when we look at Pinchas, for example, right, Phineas, one of the things that we know about him is that he's the person who is actively going out of his way in order to root out idolatry and evil from people that are Israelite.
He's zealous for Yahweh.
That's correct. So the zealousness is about their piety for how they worship God. And I'm actually pretty sure in the Torah that it says...
But it's problematic to use the term zealots because that was a political party at the time of the
No, okay, so...
Sadducees.
So look for a second.
So lowercase c.
Yes, exactly.
Look for a second on page...
They're more like, yes. That's what it's right?
Look at the very beginning of Pinchas, which is on page 918. If you want to look at it in Friedman, it's Numbers 25.
Verse 10.
Yep.
Is this where Phineas kills the man and woman in the...
Okay, and if you want to look on, it's on 288 in Friedman. Okay, if you look in verse 11, it says, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, is turned back my wrath from the Israelites by displaying among them his passion for me, bikan-o, so that I did not wipe out the Israelite people in my passion, bikin-ati. All right? In Friedman, he translates that word as jealous. But another way to talk about that word is zealous. He is zealous for his God. And actually, one of the ways that we talk about God, specifically Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, is God is Elkanah, a jealous God, or a zealous God, or a God that is impassioned. But usually it's in the pejorative, right? Because of God's jealousy, God inflicts punishment on the third and the fourth generation. Okay, so in a certain way, when I'm using the word zealous, I'm using it as a translation to this word kin'ah. Kin'ah literally in modern Hebrew means jealous. If I'm jealous of someone, I say mekaneh, I'm jealous of him. But in the Bible, it can either mean impassioned, or it can mean zealous, or jealous even. Yeah.
So I thought a lot of the tension between the North and the South and the kingdoms was that the priests, some wanted to have their lineage go to Moses. And so they were also priests. And yet when you
Yes.
talk about it like this, I know eventually they won.
We got to get there. We got to get there. Yeah.
Okay, so, but in this lineage, I mean, some priests were...
You actually have two tensions, at least two tensions. One tension is that people want to see themselves connected to Moses, as opposed to being connected to Aaron. That's one tension. But there's another tension: centralization and decentralization. Do we want to have everything centered around Jerusalem, or can there be worship that exists outside of Jerusalem? One of the things that we see starting to happen in the northern kingdom is exactly that. People start building sacrifices and altars and those kinds of things in the northern kingdom, which is a decentralization of the structure, rather than everyone coming to Jerusalem. Right? Pilgrimages and things like that.
What happened to Moses' Does it say?
Not much, we don't know, doesn't say very much about them. Other than like the mentioning of their names, there's very little said.
Although he had his own cult following, and there was a golden staff of Moses that people had started worshiping as an idol, and King Hezekiah destroyed it to try to kill that line.
All right, let's go to the golden calf narrative. So, chapter 31 of Exodus. I'm on page 527 in the red Humashim. I'm on page 172 and 173 in the Freedman. I can give you a copy afterward.
Can I ask you a quick question? So, we had the book of Genesis, which is maybe Elohim, and we have the book of Exodus, which is maybe Yahweh, and then we have the book of Leviticus, which is not the priestly line, but it's the Levitical line, or?
Well, in the
Why is it called
world of the
Leviticus?
documentary hypothesis, it's called P. But P is actually broken and subdivided into what we'll call P and H. Right? So if you take the PH of the book, no, sorry. Okay. So P is the first 16 chapters of Leviticus. I know, right? Or as my mother would say, BS was more, full, whatever. MS was more, and pile higher and deeper. Okay. Did you just record that?
That's a great joke. You should put that in the sermon.
It's my mother.
Contract negotiations. Bring that up.
Lost my train of thought.
So the Levites.
Oh yeah, H. So H is the second half, and the way that we know H is that it starts talking about doing specific things for God because God is holy.
The H stands for?
Holiness.
So whenever we hear from the Levites, we're actually hearing from the priests.
We're
Talking
hearing
about
from
the Levites.
Aaron's line
Okay.
that's giving a central message about what the law and practice ought to be, and the Levites are to follow.
All from the priestly.
Is it worth addressing the fact that although the Levites have no portion, they really in effect have a large portion because they partake of the sacrifice?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very important for them to promote the practice of sacrifice because that's not where they get their income.
Yeah, and if you look at the sacrifices carefully, you'll notice that some of the sacrifices are fully consumed, like a Holocaust offering, like they're the olah, the burnt offering, which are burnt to a crisp, you can't eat them. And some of them are actually barbecued, so that the priest can eat them. And many of the kinds of sacrifices that were brought intentionally to feed the priests. They're called truma. And they were only designated to the priests or to the families of the priests. And people who ate them that were not part of the priestly family got into a lot of trouble.
So what did the Levites eat?
They also ate things. There were different kinds of tithes of things that they would get from the temple as well. Yeah, there's a whole section in the Mishnah that talk about it happening.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Essentially, you're saying that they depended upon the generosity
Correct.
of the population.
Yeah, it was looked at as a. I mean, there were different kinds of offerings. Some were free will offerings or celebratory offerings, and so people would bring them as an expression of the gratitude or the thanks that they had, and that part of it would be sacrificed. You know, the pleasing odor would go up to God, and the rest of it would be eaten by the priests and the Levites as a way of like kind of payment for the work that they had done on behalf of the people. So if you look at chapter 31, take 30 seconds and just give it a quick scan and tell me what would you say is the theme of chapter 31. I'd say there's two major themes. We got Luke.
First part seems to be Jerry Wacknob's ancestor.
That's right. And the Lord spoke in Jerry Wacknow saying, okay?
The people who built the various artifacts in the temple.
That's right. So the first theme of chapter 31 is the instructions of building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and in particular setting aside a chief architect, Bezalel, who's going to run the project. Now, why would it make sense that this chapter is P? Why do we think it's priestly? That's the tabernacle. They're literally going to build a structure that's going to allow them to offer the priestly worship system. Okay, what's the second piece?
I'm working on that.
You're working on that. Okay, let me know when you build the Holy of Holies, and then we will invite, Indiana Jones to come and check it out. It's the Sabbath, right? Why would we put in one chapter the building of the Mishkan on the one hand, and the importance of observing the Sabbath on the other hand?
Because those want to get building so involved in it that you forget to observe Sabbath.
Absolutely. You can't build so much, especially on Shabbat, that it would mean violating Shabbat.
Right.
What else?
Well, you gotta eat daily, and,
Yep.
and if it's only the big holidays, we've got food storage problems,
That's true.
so.
But there's one other major reason, Alan.
It occurs to me that the first half of this is, here's the person to build the Mishkan,
Yep.
and he's inspired by me,
Yep.
by God. Then the second half is, and here's Shabbat to remind you that you have a covenant with me. That
Ding, ding, ding. You hit it.
are God's people.
And by the way, for those who would like to see it in the flesh, look at verse 16.
I've got it. Shall keep Shabbat.
Okay? No, but look in the Hebrew. Veshamru bnei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. It says it right in the text. When we do Kiddush on Shabbat morning and we sing Veshamru, it's not just because it's a catchy tune, it's a reminder of the brit. Shabbat is a covenant. When? For all time. Beini uvein bnei Israel, between me and all of Israel, it's ot, hilei olam. It's a sign forever. Ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai tishmai b'da'aretz. 6 days God creates the heavens and the earth. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, God rests. You're going to build a tabernacle whereby you are going to do the priestly worship that will allow you to maintain the covenant, but don't do it on Shabbat because Shabbat is the eternal covenant of rest, and it reminds us of what we do after we create. Okay? So this is the introduction to the story of the golden calf, and you'll notice it's all blue. It's all priestly, which makes total sense.
I mean, they are literally related. In one, the Mishkan is the housing that protects, God's dwelling.
Yep.
And Shabbat is the protection or the Pasach for people, because up until that time, I think the Jews were the only ones that had a Sabbath day.
Yep.
Literally everybody was worked 7 days a week until they died in their mid-20s of overwork.
Right. So
it's part of the deal.
That's right. And look at verse 18. This is the transition verse. Vayiten el Moshe kechaloto ledaber ito b'har Sinai shnei luchot ha'edut, luchot eben ketuvim be'etzba Elohim. When he finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets. Call me in the morning. 2 tablets of the pact, stone tablets that scribe with the finger of God. So you have to imagine for a moment, Moses is on the mountain. God has just finished giving him all of the details. He gave him the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. He's given him all the laws of Mishpatim. And now he's saying, for the last 2 things, I want you to do the following. I want you to build me a Mishkan and appoint Bezalel to do it. I'm going to endow him with my divine spirit. And I want you to remind the people that the most important thing is to keep Shabbat. It's my eternal covenant with the people. And then Moses, as a way of being able to take this back to the people, here are 2 iPads for you to take down and give to everyone. And on it, recorded in my finger, are all of the laws for all time. Okay? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, chapter 32 happens.
So in the 10 Commandments, I don't recall keeping Sabbath as one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Interestingly, I'm glad you brought that up. The way that we do Kiddush on Shabbat morning is we first do V'shamru, and then there's a long paragraph.
Right.
Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho, sheshit yamim ta'avod v'asita kol melachatecha. That's the paragraph that is literally the quote from the Ten Commandments.
And
Remember the Sabbath day.
Sabbath day.
That's right. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. If you want to see it in the text, go back to chapter 20 of Exodus,
No,
verse 8.
I'm referring to the little 10 things that they, short things, you shall not, I'm the God, I'm
Ten
the...
Commandments.
Yeah, it's number, it's right there in the middle. Right there,
Verse 8.
You just had a C in there.
8 to 11. Now, what's not in there
440.
is the covenantal part. Remembering the Sabbath day and keep it holy, 6 days you should work and you should rest on the seventh is all there, but not the covenantal part. The covenantal part is in the Vishamra. And you'll notice that it was written by priests, as opposed to the Decalogue. Who wrote the Decalogue?
See, I was thinking from 13 onwards, you shall not murder, you shall not, I'm Lord, Lord, you are God, and all these other things, you shall not steal, you shall not murder.
Like the last half of it.
So those, I thought they were the 10.
So the Ten Commandments is either some redaction, some priest, or it's some Yahweh. It's not exactly clear what it is. And we'd have to compare it to the Deuteronomic one anyway, to really understand the Ten
It's
Commandments.
actually more complicated than that. When the Ten Commandments were given, there wasn't an alphabet. And if you look back at older portions, they say that Ten Commandments were spoken. So the whole writing thing is a later development.
Well, that's one of the reasons that Ten Commandments is actually a misnomer. We shouldn't call them that. In Hebrew, it's called the Aseret HaDibrot, which means the 10 utterances, or the 10 proclamations. Okay, so it's actually, it's not, we mistranslated by calling it 10 Commandments. I wouldn't even know that, I don't even know if there are 10 in there. There might be 9, there might be 11. And the first one is a little iffy.
So is this, I'm trying to understand, is this other, is this the,
Are you talking about the authorship?
yeah,
Yeah, the authorship is confusing. You gotta read the note at the bottom that Friedman gives you there. It's probably a redaction in many ways, and it probably mirrors in some ways what we have in Deuteronomy. When we get to Deuterononomy, we'll look at the Shema and things.
there's eight times Moses goes up and down the mountain.
Right.
And there's an E version, a J version,
Correct.
a T version, and a
But
T
each
version.
time, he gets 10,000 steps. All right. And 10 Commandments,
Yeah,
right?
but it makes
Why did you
it,
say that?
Is that what you said? Oh, I didn't hear you. No, Okay. Look, now I want to look at chapter 32. Chapter 32, according to Friedman, was written by E. Elohist. We'll look at why in just a moment. Chapter 33 is also written by E, and then chapter 34 is written by J. We're going to look now extensively at chapter 32 and chapter 33 and look at the story of what happens in the golden calf. It's a little bit like Lord of the Flies, for those of you who remember that book. All right? Would someone like to read? You can. Let's read out of the red Humashim so that we can have the Hebrew. Chapter 32, I'm on page 529. Page 529.
I'll read.
Okay, Luke.
When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god who shall go before us. For that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has happened to him." Aaron said to them, "Take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me." And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. This he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, "Tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord." Early next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and then rose to dance.
Okay. Let's pause here for a second. What's going on? Bob.
One of the problems I have with biblical texts like this is that there never seems to be any debate about these pronouncements.
Yes.
Someone says, "Let's do this," and everybody agrees.
Yes. Which, by the way, you should know right off the bat that that's wrong, because if it was a Jewish community.
No, but they were enslaved and they learned to do what they were told to do.
Okay, that's possible.
All right. Also, they came from a land where idolatry was the way of life.
Good. Good. So there's a clear reference here to something, a desire for something familiar. That's an absolutely, I think, accurate statement. But I want to look at the very beginning for a second. Vayar ha'am ki voshesh Moshe leredet min ha'har. The people noticed that Moses was long in coming down from the mountain, or that he was delayed in coming from the mountain. He'd been up on the mountain for 40 days. And presumably the people are like, what's going on? Where is our leader? And it says, Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. They gather either around him, on top of him, against him. It doesn't actually say
They're in his
Mul
face.
Aharon, but they're literally in his face. Why did they go to Aaron?
He used to be the second in command.
He was the second in command. Let's think about it a little bit more broadly. Based on what we know from the story, what role does Aaron play in the Exodus?
He was a spokesman.
Good. So in many ways, Moses was only able to accomplish what he did because of Aaron. Aaron was the mouthpiece,
He was a press secretary.
right? Right. Sarah Huckabee said. Right. Sarah Huckabee.
God.
Okay. Okay. So that's one good point that we know that he is someone who speaks on behalf of Moses. What else do we know about Aaron? Who is he?
He's supposed to be Moses' brother.
Okay, so he's got Yichus, right? He's connected to Moses, so maybe he knows what's going on. What else do you know about Aaron?
He's a peacemaker.
Yes, he is a peacemaker, and he's a pacifist. He likes to do whatever he's told. What else do we know about him?
He had more or less magical abilities
Yes.
given to him by God.
Correct. And if we weren't reading this story from the perspective of who wrote it, we were just reading the narrative as is, Moses seems to have equal connection to God. There are times where God speaks to Moses, and there are times where God speaks to Moses and Aaron. Forget for a moment if it was a priestly source or a non-priestly source. From the text of the Torah, from the literal shot reading of the Torah, Aaron's got an in on with God. We don't know which God, but with God. Okay? Now, by the way, we've just said that if you look in verse, I guess it's toward the end of verse 1, it says, Kum aseh lanu Elohim. Get up and make for us a God. Which kind of God? An El God.
Hold on,
What
it's,
do we?
it's gods, it's Elohim.
Right, so it's plural gods. But what do we know about El, the God El?
It was in Egypt.
It was an Egyptian god. What else do we know about El?
It's a Semitic god.
Yep, it's definitely something that was familiar to the area. What else do we know about El? Yep.
That was the God who took them out of Egypt.
In some of the narratives, yes, it is the God that took him out of Egypt, except we have this tension. Who does the Torah want us to believe is the God that will actually take them out of Egypt? Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, the Tetragrammaton, Adonai. It is I and not a seraph, I and not an angel, right? And when Moses meets God the second time, God says, you know what, everyone else knew me by different names. Elohei, Abraham, Eli, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They knew me as El Shaddai. They knew me as El, but I want you to know me not just as El, but also as Yud-Hey Vav-Hey. So in this case, they revert back to using a different name of God. And they don't just say, make me a God. They're actually talking about it in the plural here. Make me gods.
They want that good old boy back.
That's right. And it says, come make us a God who shall go before us for that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt. You don't know what happened to him. Why did they care?
It's scary.
Why do they care about Moses? Like, why do they even need to reference him? What
Well,
was their connection?
This gives them a rationale for doing something different.
That's right.
We've waited.
We
We've been
But not
patient.
only have we waited, we were waiting because Moses seemed to be the person who stood between us and God. He was the intermediary. If he's not there, that must mean God's not there, so we got to figure out another plan. Yeah.
But it really sets up a lot of tension right from the get-go.
Yep.
Because if you're looking to Aaron as this second one who's had a relationship with God, and
Yep.
all of a sudden he's immediately doing this, setting up immediate tension at the beginning of this chapter.
Okay. So let's talk about Aaron's reaction.
Maybe it was just humoring Aaron until Moses came back.
Yes, and there's actually evidence in that because if you look at verse 5 says, Vayar Aharon vayivem mizbeach lefanav. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and he announced, Vayomar Chag l'Adonai machar. Tomorrow will be a Chag for Adonai. Maybe he was delaying because he knew that Moses was going to come back soon, and when Moses came back, he was going to reassure them of their connection to Adonai,
The real.
the real God. He could have said right here, tomorrow is Chag Elohim. Go ahead.
Say what you want, but in our liturgy, we say Adonai Elohim.
No, not always.
Not always, but that we do it at
Usually
all.
we say Adonai Elohim.
Well, what if he thought it was Adonai Elohim? So today we're going to do Elohim, and tomorrow we're going to do Adonai.
That's true.
This is one of my beefs, actually, with modern theology, is that we haven't kind of worked through this.
Yeah, but it's interesting the choice of language.
Yes.
Right? It's interesting that in this case, he doesn't say Adonai Elohim, he just says Adonai.
Right.
Tomorrow will be Chag Adonai.
But I think this is just shocking that he does this, blasphemous. I mean, why wouldn't he use his leadership and his great skills as a spokesperson to explain to them and teach them and wait for Moses?
Yeah.
But he didn't know.
Oh, that's a comment. All right, Alan, Bob, Lou.
I found myself wondering whether, from Aaron's perspective,
From a what perspective?
from Aaron's
Oh, Aaron's.
perspective, that he was creating a manifestation of the God that they had already followed.
Yeah.
That the golden calf was not a separate God,
Yeah.
but, you know, we're talking about what the people were used to. They're used to having a physical manifestation
Yeah,
of the God that they worshipped.
that's right.
And, I mean, Aaron kind of puts the two of them together and says, Elohim, Adonai, it's the same thing. We're going to worship the golden calf, but we're going to worship Adonai as represented by this
Right.
piece of gold.
Can I jump
I'm going
in?
to take it one step further, and then
Yes.
I'll come back to it. Do the people know what Adonai looks like?
No.
How have they experienced Adonai up until now?
A cloud,
A cloud,
pillar of fire.
pillar of fire. What else?
Acts of nature.
Burning bush. If they've heard about the story,
The
Acts of
angel of
nature.
death.
huh? The angel of death. What else? The
Did they
plagues.
hear- Did they hear God?
They hear God, right? Ro'im et hakolot, they hear the sounds of God. And at Revelation at Sinai, there's thunder, there's lightning, there's all kinds of things, but there's actually no physical manifestation of God.
Except in Moses' face, but
But that's only with Moses.
Right.
And by the way, that whole incident with Moses' face hasn't happened yet.
right.
That's coming in a couple of chapters, in chapter 34. So we're not quite there yet. So they don't know. Aaron doesn't even know. So even in Aaron's mind, he may not fully believe. By the way, who is the person that God speaks to initially when there's this calling to take the people out of Israel? I mean, Egypt. It's Moses. And then all of a sudden, kind of Aaron shows up and says, take Aaron with you. He'll do. We actually don't know officially if Aaron has the same kind of connectedness to God, to Adonai, as Moses does. At least not overtly. But look at one other thing. There's, and then we'll go to Bob and to Lou and to Phil. Look at verse 4 for a second. Vayikach mi'adam vayatzer b'to b'charet. He takes it from them and casts it into a mold, makes it into a molten calf. And then it says, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
This is your, what does he use for God over here?
He
These are gods.
says,
That's Elohim.
Eile Elohecha. This is your God from El. Okay? That brought you out of the land of Egypt. So he throws all of the stuff in a mold. It creates a calf. Where they got the mold for the calf is another story. I assume that there was a sale somewhere in, Target. And then all of a sudden it's as if this appears out of nowhere. So I think to Alan's point, there is a familiarity with this kind of God for the people. This is what they knew how to make. Or maybe more accurately, this is what they had been making.
Yes.
Right. Isn't there some idea that the jewelry, this was what they stole from the Egyptians?
Yes, so there are midrashim that suggest that the jewelry that they're using now was the stuff that they looted from the Egyptians during the Plague of Darkness. And there are other midrashim that go so far as to say that it was actually their jewelry initially that was taken from them when they became enslaved. And so they were just taking back what was theirs. Bob, Lou, and Phil.
Yeah, when he says, when Aaron says, take off all the gold rings on your, et cetera, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. Nobody says, say what?
Yeah. There's no argument. There's no pushback.
And this is a huge multitude. This is going to take time. And yet he says, I'll cast this into a mold. Well, tomorrow we'll have a festival.
Right.
So it can get done immediately.
Right. By the way, it seems as if only with Moses do people push back on anything. But with Aaron, they're all willing to go along with it.
And
Okay.
at least in the case of gold, it is very malleable. You can melt it quickly, you can fuse it,
Right.
you can shape it fairly readily.
Right.
Although, I can't imagine what it would look like under such circumstances.
Right, right. Lou?
Their leader, Moses, nobody's ever been gone for this length of time. They're on spilkins. They want to know what's going on. And they need to do something. And they are like a rabble who's aroused.
Yes.
You know, I mean, Edward G. Robinson, where's your Moses now?
Right.
And Aaron, you know, I always thought Aaron was just a wuss and just gave in to them.
In some ways, his
Yeah.
character would reflect that.
But the more I think about it, the more we've talked about it through time, he sees this and he's concerned that there's some real heavy stuff going on here.
Right.
And if nothing else, he's going to buy time by doing
Right,
it.
and there's, by the way, there are commentaries who suggest exactly what you said. This was not an attempt, according to those commentaries, for Moses to give in to them, but to buy time because the alternative, for Aaron, sorry, but the alternative would be worse.
Yeah.
If he doesn't do something quick to at least contain them, then he'll have a real rebellion on his hands.
And that, you know, that may be brought out by the fact that they exclaimed, Elohecha, and then he says,
Tomorrow will be another.
Right.
Good. Phil?
So what we're talking about here is, nobody's ever said this before. When we were all taught this section, the molten god was always assumed to be an Egyptian pagan god. That's how I was raised. There was never any conception that the molten god was Elohim. So that idea doesn't exist outside this room, and you should know that. And I think that's the right and true description. So, for example, you always hear that we're a stiff-necked people, and I looked up what stiff-neck means. It's referring to an animal that won't bend its neck to go off the path that it's on, right? And so Aaron wasn't doing anything radical. He was stiff-necked. He was helping the stiff-necked people. They were doing something they were accustomed to.
Right.
And they were Elohim people. That's what Genesis tells us, is that Joseph was a follower of Elohim, and Elohim spoke to him, and he raised the children of Israel up, so why wouldn't it be Elohim?
Right. I'll take you one step further. It's really hard to introduce the idea of a new deity to a people. Because if you already have a deity, or even multiple deities that you worship for a particular thing, to introduce a new one that not only is new, but replaces the others, it almost feels like a breach of faith. Everyone else was doing it, now all of a sudden you're telling me I have to have a new God, I can only have one of them, it can't be different and I can't see it?
That was Akhenaten's problem.
Right. Right, it's just a complete...
That's not an accident.
Right. It's a complete transformation of the way that they are relating with their deity that's foreign to them. And so in some ways, Aaron also is struggling with this.
This note is interesting because...
Which note?
On page 530, make us a god and who brought us, and it relates to what Phil was saying. So it's saying that the golden calf wasn't so much a replacement for God as it was a replacement for Moses. So Moses was the connection, and the calf became the connection to whatever this God was. And I had never thought of it that way.
Right, well one of the challenges that we often see in theology is that many people look at Moses in a godlike way.
But it wasn't God.
No, for sure not. And that's perhaps one of the challenges here, is that all of a sudden this person that they look to as a figure like God, a godlike figure, is now also gone. So the God that I can't see is gone, and the person that at least was the link, right, is also gone.
So, do you plan to talk about...
No.
Talk about the calf as the symbol for the seat, the throne for the northern god versus the cherubim.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure we understood the story, and then we're going to look at the northern-southern piece of it.
Okay.
So what I was going to ask you to do, if you haven't already, or you want to reread it, is to go back and reread the two kingdoms pieces and the priestly parts.
Before we do that, though, can we go to how the
How the what?
how Moses destroyed the golden calf.
Okay, so yeah, let's read a little bit more of the
To
story.
finish
We're
that,
gonna keep going on this for probably 2 weeks or so, because there's a lot to unpack here. And we are gonna explore the political background, the contextual background of what's happening behind the scenes. Lou, will you keep reading verse 7?
Sure. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Hurry down, for your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, have acted basely. They have been quick to turn aside from the way that I enjoined upon them. They have made themselves a molten calf, and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt.' The Lord further said to Moses, 'I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Now let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them, and that I may destroy them, and make of you a great nation.' But Moses implored the Lord his God, saying, 'Let not your anger, O Lord, blaze forth against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. Turn from your blazing anger and renounce the plan to punish your people. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, how you swore to them by yourself and said to them, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring this whole land of which I spoke, to possess forever.' And the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon his people."
All right, so God's ready to kill them. They're stiff-necked people. I can't believe I did this. I want to build a new nation for you. And Moses intervenes and says, whoa, hold on a second. Calm down. Take a deep breath. Do some kind of California meditation. And we will work it out. And remember, Zachor la'Abraham li'Yitzchak li'Yisrael. What is interesting about this particular passage that he reminds him of a covenant without two things. Mentioning the word covenant, and instead of using Jacob's name, he uses Israel's name. That's a very classic telltale sign that this is an E tradition. Instead of using Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the author uses Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. And what happens? Vayinachem Adonai al ha'ra'ah. God quiets, or his anger is subdued, if you will. And then Moses comes down the mountain, and here is where stuff hits the fan. Go ahead.
Thereupon Moses turned and went down from the mountain, bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, tablets inscribed on both their surfaces. They were inscribed on the one side and on the other. The tablets were God's word, and the writing was God's writing, incised upon the tablets. When Joshua heard the sound of the people in its boisterousness, he said to Moses, "There is a cry of war in the camp." But he answered, "It is not the sound of the tune of triumph, or the sound of the tune of defeat. It is the sound of song that I hear." As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hand and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it. He ground it to powder and strewed it upon the water, and so made the Israelites drink it.
Yummy. Okay, so let's just unpack that for a second. First of all, who is the new hero in the story?
Moses.
Besides Moses. Joshua.
Go Joshua.
Not Aaron. Why is it important that we know that Joshua is the hero?
He's going to be the continuing
That's
person.
correct. He's going to continue after Moses dies, and it's not going to be through the line of Aaron. Aaron's line is going to have a different responsibility. But there's another thing that you should notice here. Look at the way that the author writes about the tablets that we have. 15. He's got the 2 tablets in his hand. Ketuvim mishnei evrehem mizeh umizehem ketuvim. They were inscribed on both surfaces. They were inscribed on the one side and on the other. Valuchot ma'aseh Elohim. They are the work of Elohim. Hema b'hamichtav michtav Elohimhu. Charut al haluchot. It is literally God's word that is on there, but specific name of God, Elohim. And Joshua then all of a sudden steps up and he intervenes. And then to Phil's point, we take the tablets, they get smashed. He takes the calf, grinds it up into a powder, mixes it into a cocktail, and makes all of the people drink it. That was the first protein shake. Okay?
How do you,
Well, that puts, then God is within you.
Right, exactly. Okay,
No, that's not the point. It's the worst possible thing you can do to a god, to eat him and shit him out.
to eat him what?
To eat him and shit him out. That's the whole point of
Did
this.
you get that on record too?
Excrement, what's the Hebrew word for, I don't know what.
All right.
But that's the point that they're trying to make here, I think,
Yeah,
is
that's
to demote him to
Yeah.
the lowest possible level you can be demoted to.
Yeah.
Since the golden calf is essentially wooden covered with gold leaf or gold foil,
Right,
it'll burn the charcoal, and that's the powder.
right.
And as for the gold, it would form a puddle, not a powder.
Right. Right. Excuse me.
It's so interesting to me that right in the scene before, Moses is able to calm God down.
Right.
And then,
Moses gets
when
angry.
Moses sees this, he goes berserk,
Yep.
which is perfect example of it. So much easier to tell somebody else what to
Right.
do than to do it
Although to your
yourself.
But
point,
it's more than that.
go ahead.
Well, because Moses, even as angry as he is not gonna annihilate all the people.
Right.
I mean, he's trying to talk God down from a disaster.
Right.
Whereas, so he, it's.
He's trying to shock the
it's
system.
reconcile, yeah.
That's right.
You can say, okay, you can be angry, but that's going too far.
But how can he take
He's
these
about to commit a
tablets that
massacre.
God's
Okay,
writing on them
good.
and
So how
writing
can
them?
Moses have the chutzpah
It's
to
not
do
good.
exactly what he just did? By the way, we're going to stop here. We will continue this. If you want to read the end of the story, read through the end of chapter 33. We'll review it next time. You can reread the stuff in here on the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom and on the priests. But I want to I'll leave you with this tidbit. Does anyone know what the rabbis in the Talmud say about Moses in this moment when he smashes the tablets? In this moment when Moses smashes the tablets, the rabbis in the Talmud say, literally in the Hebrew, Yasher Koach. Right? As if to say it was worth desecrating the tablets of God, right? As a way of being able to do what he did. They elevate his status so much because of two things. One, the people weren't worthy of it. And second, in a way, if they weren't going to understand, if they thought they could just build whatever they were going to build in order to be able to worship God, then even those tablets that they brought down would not have been enough to convince them. So what better way to make the point than to take something made by God and say, I'm done with them. And by the way, he breaks both of them. He breaks the golden calf and the tablets. Clean slate.
Is there a midrash saying that the words disappeared from the tablets before
Yep.
he destroyed them?
Yeah.
Yeah, to go over that.
So we will continue this next week. I want to get to the other part of the story because there's a whole issue here with the Levites that's about to come out, and there are a group of people who are going to get killed. They're just not the Levites. So we have to figure it out. Where were the Levites, and why is Aaron different?